At a festive celebration honoring a young woman's birthday, guests anticipated cake and well wishes, but the mother-in-law had orchestrated an entirely different sequence of events. With a triumphant smirk, she announced, "And now for a surprise. I'll show everyone who my son has truly brought into the family," confidently activating the projector. However, what appeared on screen caused the instigator herself to turn pale and frantically pull at the wires. Greetings, dear listeners. I'm delighted to welcome you to my channel. I present a new, engaging story for your enjoyment. Elmira had learned that her mother-in-law was planning something extraordinary for her birthday. 2 weeks before the event, her husband Timur casually let it slip as they were returning from work. "My mother wants to give you a surprise at the party. She says it will be unforgettable." He smiled, clearly oblivious to any underlying treachery. Elmira merely nodded, but a knot tightened in her stomach. Zinaida Nikolaevna, her mother-in-law, had shown no warmth towards Elmira in their 3 years of marriage. There were only biting remarks, comparisons to her son's ex-girlfriend, and constant hints that Elmira wasn't good enough for their family. That very evening, Elmira called her sister Diana, recounting the peculiar surprise. Diana, a lawyer who had seen her fair share of life's twists and turns, became immediately wary. "You know her character. If she's planning something and calls it unforgettable, expect a setup. You need to be on your guard." Elmira agreed, but what could she possibly do? Cancel her own birthday celebration? Timur wouldn't understand. He adored his mother, viewing her as selfless and wise, failing to notice how she had manipulated him since childhood. Zinaida Nikolaevna was indeed a master manipulator. A widow for 15 years, she had built her life around her only son, controlling his every move, knowing his passwords to all his cards, and regularly checking his phone under the guise of helping him find a contact. When Timur brought Elmira home, his mother greeted her with an icy stare. "How exotic," she had said then, surveying her new daughter-in-law with a critical eye. Elmira, who was half Tatar with dark, long hair and almond-shaped eyes, did indeed stand out against the fair-skinned Timur's relatives. But the issue wasn't her appearance. Zinaida Nikolaevna simply couldn't accept that someone had taken her son away. After the wedding, the real ordeal began. Her mother-in-law would visit without warning, rearrange furniture in their apartment, criticize Elmira's cooking, buy Timur clothes, and insist he wear only her gifts. Once she threw out new curtains that Elmira had spent 2 weeks choosing, declaring, "That's tasteless. I've hung proper ones." Elmira tried to talk to her husband, but he dismissed her concerns. "She just wants to help. You're too sensitive." Sensitive. That word became Timur's mantra. Every time Elmira tried to explain that his mother was crossing boundaries, he would repeat, "You're exaggerating. She's always been like this. Just get used to it." Get used to her mother-in-law rummaging through her purse, calling Timur 10 times a day, demanding he come over for any trivial reason. Get used to Zinaida Nikolaevna recounting stories about her son's previous girlfriend, Olesya, at family dinners, idealizing her to the heavens. Oh, Olesya used to bake such pies. And remember, Timur, how she took care of your health? Elmira worked as a manager at a trading company, earning a good salary around 80,000 rubles. Her own money was sufficient to avoid financial dependence on her husband. But her mother-in-law managed to turn even this into a point of criticism. A career woman, always at work. When are you going to have children? Is your career more important than family? Children were a sensitive subject. Elmira wanted to wait, strengthen her relationship with her husband, and save money. But Zinaida Nikolaevna saw this as selfishness. A week before the birthday, Elmira noticed her mother-in-law started visiting more frequently, always when Timur wasn't home. She'd arrive with an innocent air, ostensibly to check in or bring baked goods, but her eyes would dart around the apartment as if searching for something. One day, Elmira caught her in the bedroom. Zinaida Nikolaevna was standing by the dresser, holding a jewelry box. "Oh, I just wanted to see what you had in here," she said, unfazed. Elmira silently took the jewelry box back. After this incident, she installed a small camera in the apartment just in case. Diana supported the decision. If she's plotting something malicious, it's better to have proof. You never know. Elmira didn't think the camera would actually be needed, but her intuition suggested her mother-in-law wouldn't stop, and she was right. On Monday, 4 days before the celebration, Zinaida Nikolaevna arrived with a large bag. "Timur gave me the keys. He said you were at work. I want to decorate the apartment for your birthday." She brought in garlands, balloons, and some boxes. Elmira, who had returned from work early due to a rescheduled meeting, froze in the doorway. Her mother-in-law hadn't expected to see her. "Oh, you're home already? Well, fine, I'll get everything ready anyway." She bustled around, hanging decorations, but Elmira noticed the woman entered the study, where their shared computer was located several times. In the evening, after her mother-in-law left, Elmira checked the camera footage. What she saw made her blood run cold. Zinaida Nikolaevna turned on the computer, inserted a USB drive, and methodically copied files. Photographs, documents, correspondence. She was clearly looking for something compromising. Elmira watched the recording twice. Her mother-in-law didn't even try to hide her actions. She presumably was confident no one would find out. The next day, Elmira took a day off and went to Diana's. She showed her the recording. Her sister pursed her lips. "She's gathering dirt on you. She probably wants to show something to Timur or the guests at the birthday party to make you look bad and force a divorce." Diana pondered. "But we have an advantage. We know her plan. We can prepare." They sat up all evening discussing options. Elmira didn't want a scandal, but she understood that if Zinaida Nikolaevna truly intended to publicly disgrace her, silence wasn't an option. "Let's gather some materials on her," Diana suggested. "If she wants to put on a show, she'll get a response. But we need to act carefully." Elmira recalled that Zinaida Nikolaevna often boasted about her connections, wealth, and impeccable reputation. But there was one story her mother-in-law never told. A few months prior, Timur had mentioned that his mother was consulting a lawyer about some inheritance. Elmira hadn't paid it much attention then, but now remembered that Zinaida Nikolaevna had been strangely nervous during that period. What if there was something unsavory involved? Diana, using her connections in legal circles, began to investigate. 2 days later, she called, her voice sounding triumphant. "You won't believe it. Your mother-in-law contested her aunt's will 3 years ago. She claimed the old woman was incapacitated when she left her apartment to a charitable organization. The court sided with Zinaida, and she got the apartment. But there are nuances." Diana sent the documents. It turned out her mother-in-law had provided forged medical certificates regarding her aunt's health, pressured witnesses, and threatened neighbors. The charitable foundation didn't appeal the decision due to a lack of resources. Elmira studied the documents. Additionally, Diana found something else. Zinaida Nikolaevna had been renting out that very apartment illegally, not paying taxes. The amount over 3 years had accumulated substantially, around 400,000 rubles. "But we won't blackmail her," Diana said. "We'll just show her you have leverage if she decides to put on a performance." The birthday arrived. Elmira woke with a heavy premonition. Timur, oblivious, kissed her, gave her flowers, and promised the evening would be unforgettable. "Mom has prepared so much. You'll see." Elmira smiled, but her stomach churned. She'd already given Diana a USB drive with copies of the documents on her mother-in-law and asked her to be nearby. "If anything goes wrong, I'll give you a signal." Guests began to arrive around 7 in the evening. Friends, Elmira's colleagues, and Timur's relatives came. Zinaida Nikolaevna appeared in an elegant suit with impeccable hair and a radiant smile. She hugged Elmira, offered congratulations, but triumph gleamed in her eyes. Elmira saw her mother-in-law exchange glances with her sister, Timur's aunt, and whisper something. Both smirked. The evening proceeded as planned. The table was set, Guests ate, drank, and mingled. Timur delivered a heartfelt toast to his wife. Elmira almost believed everything would be all right. But then Zinaida Nikolaevna stood up, tapped her glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. "Dear guests, I'd like to say a few words. Today is my daughter-in-law's birthday, and I, as a loving mother-in-law, have prepared a special gift for her, a video presentation." Elmira felt her palms grow damp. Here it was. Zinaida Nikolaevna, with an air of triumph, took out a remote, switched on the projector that had been set up in the living room earlier. The screen on the wall lit up. "And now for a surprise. I'll show everyone who my son has truly brought into the family." Her mother-in-law's voice rang out as she pressed a button. An image appeared on the screen, but it wasn't Elmira. It was Zinaida Nikolaevna herself. In the video, she was sitting in an office talking to a man. The sound was muffled, but phrases were discernible. "I need the aunt's medical certificates to prove incapacity." "How much?" The man named a price. Zinaida nodded. "We'll do it. The main thing is that no one digs too deep." Silence fell in the room. Zinaida Nikolaevna turned pale, staring at the screen. What is this? This isn't right. It's a setup." She lunged for the projector, beginning to tear at the wires. "Who switched the files?" But the video continued. Now documents appeared on screen. Forged certificates, records of illegal apartment rentals, amounts of unpaid taxes. Elmira stood up, approached her mother-in-law, and gently but firmly took her arm, stopping her. "Let's finish watching, dear mother-in-law." Her voice was calm, almost affectionate, but carried an edge of steel. Zinaida Nikolaevna tried to pull away, but Elmira held fast. Diana, standing by the wall, took out her phone, recording the scene. Just in case. The video ended. The guests sat stunned. Timur looked at his mother, then at his wife, not understanding what was happening. "Mom, is this true? You forged—" Zinaida Nikolaevna's mouth opened, but no words came out. Finally, she stammered. "It's all her. She set it up. She wanted to tarnish me." Elmira smirked. "I saw you copying files from our computer. You thought you'd find something compromising about me. You wanted to show the guests how bad I am. It's just that I knew about your plans, and I was prepared." She took out her phone, opened the camera recording of Zinaida Nikolaevna rummaging through their computer. She showed it to everyone. "Here's the proof. My mother-in-law broke into our home and stole personal data, and the video you just saw is the truth about her, about how she deceived her own aunt, took an apartment from a charitable foundation, and evaded taxes for 3 years." Timur's aunt jumped up, clutching her chest. "Zina, is this true? You told me Aunt bequeathed you the apartment." Zinaida Nikolaevna darted her gaze around, seeking support, but everyone looked at her with condemnation. Timur sat with his head in his hands. "Mom, how could you?" His mother-in-law attempted to justify herself. The aunt was old. She didn't understand anything. The apartment would have gone to waste. And this, she pointed a finger at Elmira, she wants to destroy our family. She deliberately arranged everything. But her voice trembled, and everyone could see she was lying. Elmira sighed. "I don't want to destroy our family, but I won't allow myself to be humiliated. You've poisoned my life for 3 years, controlled my every move, criticized me, compared me to others, and now you've decided to publicly disgrace me. But you know what? I'm not who you think I am. I won't stay silent and tolerate this." Zinaida Nikolaevna grabbed her bag and bolted for the exit. At the threshold, her face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this. I'll get a divorce. Timur, do you hear me? She's manipulating you." But Timur didn't answer. He sat with his head down. The guests began to leave. Some approached Elmira, shook her hand, and offered words of support. Diana hugged her sister. "You were brilliant. You handled it with dignity." Elmira nodded but felt a sense of emptiness inside. She didn't rejoice in victory. She was simply exhausted. When everyone had left, Timur finally lifted his head. His eyes were red. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elmira sat beside him. "I tried. I've been trying for 3 years, but you wouldn't listen. You said I was exaggerating, that your mother was just caring. She was preparing a strike, wanting to destroy me in front of everyone. If I hadn't found out, that's what would have happened." Timur was silent, then quietly asked, "What now?" Elmira shrugged. "I don't know. You decide. But I won't tolerate her in our lives anymore. If you want to communicate with your mother, that's your right, but she will never enter my life." He nodded. "I need time to think." Elmira got up, went to the bedroom, lay down on the bed, and closed her eyes. The birthday turned out to be memorable in the most unexpected way. The next morning, Timur went to his mother's and returned in the evening, looking gaunt. "I spoke with her. She confessed, it's all true, both about the apartment and the taxes. She cried, begged for forgiveness, saying she did it all for me to secure my future." He looked at Elmira. "I told her we need a break, that she shouldn't come without an invitation, and that she must apologize to you." Zinaida Nikolaevna never apologized. A week later, she called Timur, had a hysterical outburst, demanding he choose between his mother and his wife. Timur, to Elmira's surprise, chose his wife. "I've followed my mother's lead my whole life, but what she did crosses all boundaries. I'm ashamed." He changed the locks on the apartment, stopped answering his mother's calls at odd hours, and set boundaries. Zinaida Nikolaevna had to repay the money to the tax authorities. Diana helped arrange it to avoid legal proceedings, but her mother-in-law paid off the debt for a whole year, giving up many of her usual expenses. She sold the apartment to cover part of the debt. Her reputation within the family was shattered. Relatives who learned the truth turned away. Timur's aunt stopped speaking to her. Elmira didn't gloat. She simply lived her life. Her relationship with Timur slowly improved. He became more attentive, started listening, and noticed her needs. They underwent several family therapy sessions, which helped. 6 months later, Elmira discovered she was pregnant. Timur was overjoyed but immediately asked, "Shall we tell Mom?" Elmira considered, "Yes, but she won't be involved in raising the child, not now. Maybe someday, if she changes." Zinaida Nikolaevna learned about the pregnancy from Timur. She cried on the phone, begging for permission to visit to see her daughter-in-law. Elmira refused, not out of malice, but simply because she wasn't ready. The wound hadn't healed. A year passed. Elmira sat at a playground rocking a stroller with her daughter. The sun was warm, children ran around, laughing. She looked at her sleeping baby under a light blanket and suddenly saw Zinaida Nikolaevna. Her mother-in-law stood at the entrance to the playground, holding a bag, presumably a gift. She looked at the stroller, at her granddaughter, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Their eyes met. Zinaida Nikolaevna took a step forward, but Elmira shook her head. "Not now." Her mother-in-law stopped, nodded, wiped her tears, placed the bag on a bench near the entrance, and left. Elmira watched her go. There was no triumph, no pity, only weariness. She returned to the stroller, adjusted the blanket, and suddenly noticed her daughter's eyes had opened. They were brown, like hers. The baby looked at her mother seriously, as if understanding everything. Elmira smiled, picked her up. "Everything will be all right, little son. I promise."